Talk to you in a few minutes. Tonight, the Alabama Parole Board has a little more than 2 weeks to fix a broken system. The Way 31I team went straight to the man who helped create the tool that let a criminal serving a life sentence out on parole. We wanted to know how the program could consider Jimmy Spencer, a career criminal, a low to medium risk of offending again. He's now charged with killing 3 people in Guntersville. The Ohio Risk Assessment System is supposed to look into every aspect of a criminal's past, present, and future to predict the chances of committing another crime. Ohio uses it as part of a 10-step process. Alabama uses it only twice. Way 31's Brecken Terry is live in Franklin County, where Spencer was first sentenced more than 30 years ago.
The leading researcher who developed the tool told me it's not foolproof. It only works if the correct data is entered into it, something Alabama admits didn't happen before the parole hearing for Jimmy Spencer.
First of all, it's just a tool. It doesn't make a decision. People make decisions.
I drove to the University of Cincinnati to ask Ed Latessa about the Ohio Risk Assessment System, also known as ORAS. Latessa told me the goal is simple.
We're trying to predict, in this case, recidivism.
He helped create it to track and, more importantly, rehabilitate criminals from the time they're convicted until they're released. He explained Ohio's parole board uses ORAS from the moment someone is convicted until it's time to decide if an inmate is ready for parole.
It looks at their risk factors. And so you might be high risk because you use drugs, you don't have a job, and you hang around with people like yourself. Right? I might be high risk because I think what I do is okay. I have no family support.
That's how Ohio uses it. Alabama's parole board uses ORAS a little differently. The board only uses it when considering parole and the criminal's likelihood to reoffend. They also use it to determine how much supervision someone gets after being paroled. Latessa told me what ORAS should have looked at when evaluating parole for Jimmy Spencer, a career criminal serving a life sentence.
The reentry tool would look at his criminal history. It would look at his criminal thinking and behavioral patterns, and it sounds like he would have scored high in both.
But the career criminal with over 50 disciplinary offenses in prison didn't score as a high-risk offender. The state admits it's unclear if the parole board even entered the right information into the tool at this point.
It assumes the information's correct. It assumes the person doing the tool's been trained and is filling it out properly.
Bobby Longshore was on the parole board when people from Ohio came to train members on ORAS. Longshore, who quit in 2016, said he immediately had doubts.
She said this will make it easier to parole the hard cases. And that just astonished me.
Latessa agrees and questioned why Alabama's relying so heavily on ORAS instead of hearing from criminals, victims, and families.
There's no one size fits all with assessment, all right? And when you get a case that's an outlier, it's really incumbent on the system to look at as much as they can before they make that decision, because, you know, they're putting the public at risk.
We found several cases where the parole board was putting the public at risk. The biggest mistake, though, was paroling Jimmy Spencer. He is now charged with killing Martha Relaford and Marie Martin, plus Martin's 7-year-old great-grandson, Colton Lee, back in July on Mulberry Street in Guntersville. Spencer is currently being held at the Kilby Correctional Facility in South Alabama. He will be back in Marshall County in March for a hearing as well as mental evaluation. Live in Franklin County, Brecken Terry, Way 31 News.
Thanks, Brecken. Our I-Team stories led to Governor Ivey calling for a complete overhaul to the parole system. And now the board has until the end of the month to come up with a new plan to reform the state's policies and procedures when it comes to parolees. The governor and attorney general sent the board's original corrective action plan back to the drawing board, saying it simply wasn't good enough. The board must now focus on procedures and policies and creating a new review committee to oversee early parole cases. It must meet with victims and advocacy groups on a regular basis and schedule performance reviews for all parole workers. Despite the governor's moratorium on early paroles, it appears the board is letting certain criminals out of prison. On December 5th, the board granted parole to Traval Rayford after serving 1 year of a 15-year sentence for armed robbery. The moratorium is in place until the end of the year. Last year, 54% of the cases that went before the board were granted parole, a record. A Montgomery news outlet reports the board is on track to beat that record this year. By August, it had released more than 3,600 inmates. The board released 3,800 for all of 2017.